Dan the Catman here with a very special announcement before we begin this week's episode 34. The Shelter Cats podcast is finally getting a website, or rather a better website. Coming soon to a web browser near you, sheltercatspodcast.com will be a much better, more comprehensive website describing the show, and there will be episodes you could listen to online, and just a better all-around experience for the Shelter Cats podcast. Coming soon to a web browser near you, and I don't care what web browser you use, sheltercatspodcast.com. And right now, you can email me, Dan at sheltercatspodcast.com, or you can email my amazing co-host, Michelle, at sheltercatspodcast.com. Or if you don't want to speak to either of us, send a general email to info@sheltercatspodcast.com. Can't wait to see what that website's about. And now, on with the episode. Hello there, cat people. Welcome to episode 37 of the Shelter Cats podcast. And welcome to the very first podcast that I'm doing not about cats. This is basically a spin-off podcast where I'm going to be doing another show that I'm working on called The Hermit Chronicles. So this is, while it's part of the Shelter Cats podcast season 2, this is going to be serving as kind of a offshoot to be able to speak to people, maybe not necessarily about cats or who don't have cats, or just about interesting people that I would like to speak to about topics not necessarily having to do with felines. So that's the topic of today's show. So I'm not going to do my usual intro, although please do adopt, don't shop. Please go find me on the usual places. This is an episode not necessarily about cats, although cats come into play here and there. So welcome to my first non-cat Shelter Cats podcast episode. So I'm recording this in mid-October, so this will be out around the holidays, but we have Halloween in mind, and the weather is finally cooler. My cats are finally happier, and I might be taking in a foster, even though I said I wouldn't, but we'll discuss that in future episodes. But tonight I get the absolute privilege and honor to interview and have a great discussion with my dear old friend Peter Knego, who's had a fascinating career in music, has had a fascinating career with ships, ocean liners, famous ocean liners of the 50s and 60s. He's had a connection with the original Love Boat from the 70s, the Pacific Princess. He's bought and sold fittings from cruise ships that have been scrapped, which he'll explain how he got into that. He's recorded videos and photographs of a lot of old famous cruise ships like the Achille Lauro and other ships, like an old ship called the SS America when it was kind of laid up in the backwaters of Greece in the 80s. And he's had a music career, and he's turned me on to an amazing band called Sparks, which you may not have heard of, but God damn it, you should, and you will by the time we're done with this, because they're an amazing band that has basically influenced every genre of music that you've listened to at any point from the 1970s on. So just an interesting person. His parents were in Hollywood. His mother and father were in Hollywood. His mother just passed away recently. Just an amazing person, an amazing dear friend, and he has a YouTube channel called Midship Cinema, and I help him with his Instagram. I do his Instagram posts. So not only is he a dear friend, we work together because I try to help as much as I can, because his YouTube channel is amazing and you should all go watch it, Midship Cinema. Just an interesting person with an interesting career, and he lives in a house in California that is entirely made up of old cruise ships and old ocean liners. Every fitting, every part of his house, all the furniture, all the everything has come from an old cruise ship or old ocean liner that has been sold for scrap, broken up, no longer here. So, welcome to my foray into non-cat podcasting. Thank you so much for giving it a try. I think you'll enjoy it. And without further ado, here is my conversation with my amazing dear friend of 25 years, Peter Knego. Enjoy. Hello, Peter.
Dan, how are you doing?
How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very honored.
So you are my pilot of a spinoff I'm working on. So you're going to be on my cat podcast, but not about cats,
Right.
for a spinoff that I'm calling the Hermit Chronicles.
Love it.
So you are my first non-cat related guest. So thank you so much.
Thank you. But listen to this. Did you hear that?
Thank you. I don't have enough money for a soundboard or
Okay.
effects.
Well,
So.
this is Mishmishko, my which is a Yugoslav word or Croatian. It's a plastic cat that squeaks that my father and mother bought for me when we went to Dubrovnik when he was making this movie called Secret Invasion. And they bought me this plastic cat to keep me quiet on the airplane. And I've had Mishmishko ever since. So there you go. I have a cat, Dan.
So you have a cat. Okay. So
Yeah.
we got a cat. We got a cat reference into this anyway. That's awesome.
That's about it. Yeah.
Hey, it works. So just so everyone, the bazillion people listening know how I met you. When I was half my age in the 90s, I had the ocean liner bug. And I was involved briefly with a little ship called the United States.
A little bitty thing. Yep.
A little tiny rusty thing, and I won't go into it because it'll just make me angry. But doing research, I came across very quickly a website called Maritime Matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I came to know you, because of all the wonderful articles and things you wrote on there. And when I had the bug, I had to have every deck plan in history.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to spend all the money I made, which wasn't much, on deck plans. And Richard Faber kept trying to talk me down, dude, you don't need to spend all your money on these.
Richard Faber told you not to spend money?
He was trying to tell you, because I was young. He said, you don't need to buy all of them. Buy a few, come back. Buy a few, come back. He was actually very sensible.
Okay, and for the sake of your listeners, because most people don't know, Richard Faber was, I liken him to the people in the music industry that supply drugs to DJs and artists, because he had these incredible piles and piles, stacks of ephemera from ocean liners that we were all fighting to get. And he would dangle them in front of us like drugs or candy for kids or whatever it was. And we would literally fight each other, and he would play favorites. Like if he liked you, then you would get access to his list early, the whole deal. So anyway, Karen,
I remember that. And every time I went into his apartment, the drug addict reference is actually very, very appropriate, because I was like, holy shit, look at this. He bought the apartment next to him and blew through it.
Yeah.
And everyone, he had a cat, but that's besides the point.
Well, but where would you find it in all of that?
It was on the couch looking depressed. Like, what is all this stuff? I can't touch any of it. Why am I here?
Right.
But I was looking for a particular deck plan from the Italis.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find it, and I was obsessed with it for 2 minutes, and I emailed you, and you sent me a color copy of it from your own collection. And that was our first interaction. I said, you know where I could get one? He goes, you responded, there's no way, but I'll send you a copy. What's your address?
That was nice of me. I don't even remember that, Dan. I'm glad I did that. Okay.
And I have it in a frame somewhere. And that was our first. And one of my friends, I was like, he sent me this. Peter sent me this. Look at that. I have it and you don't. Fuck you. I thought I was hot shit because I had that for about
Well,
five
it was hot
months.
shit to have that Italese deck plan. That was like I mean, I think they printed like 50, and because the ship lasted for literally weeks under that name, and then they laid her up because she was a disaster.
I was just fascinated by that particular point of that ship's career, and you had it, and the early days of websites and email and website SEO. Your website came up first, and that was our first. And then with social media, we became friends later on. Sort of after my ocean liner bug had left me. I don't really have that bug anymore.
You don't?
So that,
oh, that's too bad. How did you get rid of it, by the way? That probably saved me. I mean, it's too late in my life. I'm stuck, but what'd you do? How'd you get over it? Did you go to like Betty Ford for ocean liners or what?
I actually sold most of my deck plans back to Richard Faber like 5 years later,
right?
Because I was moving out on my own, and I needed the money, and I had a Normandy first class deck plan.
Ooh.
TLDR, French ocean liner from the 30s.
Yeah.
But and I needed the money, and I said, would you take this stuff back? Some wasn't from him. And he was, he gave me a good price. I don't remember what it was. It was enough to kind of help me get out on my own. And once I kind of purged that from my life, all these boxes of deck plans, it just kind of, it just kind of left. I still have the interest. I don't have the obsessive passion with that I had as a kid. And now with everything online and groups and whatever, it's just so easy to just look it up that I don't need to have the physical object.
Yeah. That's kind of what happened a lot with me in collecting too. I used to, before there was eBay, I would go to the swap meets like every day. There was a swap meet in LA practically, certainly every weekend. And I would drive like, 50, 60 miles to be the first person there. And then, go from A to Z in every single stall looking for anything to do with ocean liners, thinking that I was finding and preserving the most important things in the world. And then along comes eBay. And there's all that stuff that I paid a fortune for and, drove all that way and got sunburned over. And I'm like, oh my God, other people have these things. And then eBay was really hot for a few years in the ocean liner collecting world.
Right.
But then I started buying the parts of the ships and I was like, I can't do this eBay stuff anymore. So I graduated to much worse, more obsessive, crazy stuff like, rebuilding my house with, parts of the ships themselves. But I have to say, I've never lost my interest. I still love the ships and I'm relieved I don't, spend hundreds a week like I used to on eBay. I couldn't do that now anyway.
Right.
And now I just obsess over YouTube and, other things. But
right. I've become, I'm the old man in the armchair criticizing the kids getting the facts wrong.
Yeah,
but
me too.
All of that preamble out of the way. There's a lot about you that I've always wanted to know about, because there's an ocean. Well, an answer what you want. There's an ocean liner. There's a ship aspect that I think people would be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And a few weeks ago, I interviewed her name is Emma. She has a YouTube channel called Emma Cruises.
Oh yeah, sure. She's like an major influencer. She's got thousands and thousands of followers, and yeah.
But I interviewed her because she has a cat named Captain Hudson, and she sells a stuffed Captain Hudson and she raises money for mercy ships.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I said, I'm not asking you about cruise ships. I don't care. I'm asking you about your cat. And she was relieved. But I said, so here's how I found you. And I mentioned you, that, the midship channel, and which we'll get into. And I said, the algorithm after I watched Peter's videos, the algorithm said you might like Emma Cruise's. And once I described in very brief detail what you did, I said, if you see early Carnival pieces on the newer Carnival ships, that is my friend Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And she, oh wow, I've never heard of that. So there's that aspect,
yeah,
and there's a music aspect. So can we get the big picture of you?
Well, okay. It is. I mean, I am a little, I'm so obsessive, and I am like, if it has to do with ocean liners and cruise ships, I am totally in for the long haul, have been since I was 13 years old or 12 years old. And I had an assignment in my American history class about the Lusitania. I had no idea what the Lusitania was. I thought it was a battleship. And then when I started researching and found out it was a four-funneled ocean liner that sank with over 1,000 lives lost just 3 years after the Titanic, which of course everyone knew even back then before that James Cameron epic thing. And I just became obsessed with classic ocean liners from like the Victorian and Edwardian era. John Maxstone Graham, this wonderful historian who had the writing style of Gore Vidal, who I think is the greatest writer of all time, because he's so rich. And you read a sentence of John's and you're immediately going to the dictionary like, what? I never heard this word before.
That I've done that.
Yeah, exactly. So he was really eloquent, and that book, The Only Way to Cross, was not just for ship people. It was a bestseller on the New York Times. So that and the Poseidon Adventure, which came out that same year, were my trifecta of like a perfect storm of ocean liner. I got on, and normally I got over something after about a year and moved on. I used to collect stamps, and I collected coins, I collected butterflies, autographs. But with ships, it just got worse and worse. I got more and more obsessed over the years. I started visiting ships, photographing them, spending all of my money, what little money I had, chasing them off in far corners of the world. If they were in laid up in the Ukraine or the Philippines or China, I would, gather all my resources and get myself over to document them. And it just became this thing where I couldn't get enough. And I still can't, although I've tried to focus my interests, on being more productive and not spending everything I've got. I am also a cruise writer, a journalist, where I'm one of those dudes that gets to go on free cruises and write about it. But and everybody's like, oh, that's such a, easy job and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's really not, because, I'm documenting everything, practically 24/7 while I'm on the ship. I'm writing, taking notes, trying to be somewhat professional. And, I have fellow colleagues who do the same thing. And when you work on this article that you painstakingly write, you get paid about $150 for it in the end. I mean, there is no income, but you have this wonderful lifestyle where you get to experience all these different ships and different itineraries. And so I've been trying to get my YouTube channel more eyes, and you have been so kind and supportive of it by helping me with putting up Instagram posts whenever I do a new video. And I'm getting decent, it's certainly worth continuing to pursue and build, because I have this repertory of footage that I've been shooting for the past 30 years, long before everybody had an iPhone and was doing the same thing. So I captured some really cool ships that no longer exist, in their waning days of glory. So I can make videos about ships like the Achille Lauro and the Constitution and the Britannis and the Norway. They're all long gone, and they're classics, and they're beautiful, unlike the new cruise ships, which are, of course, very impressive, but they lack that elegance and that style and that one-off craftsmanship that these, mid-century ships had. So anyway, that's kind of a nutshell. And then in addition to all of that, I've been trekking to India, where the ships get scrapped. Since 2003, I've gone to this horrendous beach called Alang, which is, about a 10-mile stretch where there's a 30-foot tidal variance, and they run ships up on the beach. And then they, send the workers on board when the tide goes down, strip the ships, start cutting them down, melting them down for the steel. And there's all sorts of pollution and safety issues. They've improved a lot of that since I first went, but it was surrounded in, it was almost like espionage to get in there because Westerners aren't allowed. And anyway, I documented these ships being broken up, and I bought these fittings, artwork, doors, paneling, you name it, filled these 40-foot containers, about 10 or 12 of them. I lost count, frankly, and shipped them to my home in California, rebuilt my home. There isn't a single door in this house that isn't from a ship except for the shower doors. And if I found shower doors on a ship, I probably would replace the ones I've got.
I was going to say not for long.
Yeah, not for long. Exactly. There's stunning art panels, that were commissioned in the 40s, 50s, and 60s by the governments of that sponsored these ships, because ships used to be the ambassadors to the nations they represented. They were really special. The Italians had the best artwork. The British had the best woodwork. The French were really stylish. I mean, these ships were special. And when they all went for scrap, I was there waiting for them at the scrapyard, wanting to save everything I could. So that's another aspect of what I do. And that I love, because I wake up every day, and when I'm not traveling, I'm surrounded by this mid-century beauty from these, glorious ships. And I walk their decks when they still existed. So there's a lot of memories. And, to me, I feel they have spiritual power. All the lives that were influenced on these ships, people going on their first vacations, getting married, having kids, it's all, ships are a major part of people's lives before they became sort of these big tacky floating casino amusement parks. They used to carry people from A to B, and they were significant, and they were very important. And then instantly they were decimated by the airplane and the fuel crisis, and away they went. So there, I hope I didn't babble too much, but it's hard to explain all the facets of what I do with the ship stuff. So
so there's not one aspect of your home, with the exception of the shower doors, and I'm assuming plumbing, that is not from
drywall.
Something.
Yeah, we have a little drywall, and the framework of the house.
See, I would be, and don't ever get a cat. I can't believe I just said that, because imagine if a cat scratched something.
Oh yeah, that would be. Well, I love dogs, and I don't have a dog partly for that reason.
What was the? I'm gonna ask a few questions. What was the? I'm always fascinated about you went to Alang, India. You pronounce things so much better than my Brooklyn accent, so I'm not going to even.
I love your Brooklyn accent. It makes me feel right at home with my.
I'm not going to even try to match your perfect pronunciation. What was the motivation to go to the beaches and fill containers? Was that save as much as possible?
Well, it came about. There was this little ship that I'm sure, the Oriole, this little British liner, small. It used to sail from Liverpool to West Africa, and it somehow survived for decades as a floating hotel, workers hostel, etc., in the Middle East when they were building oil fields in Saudi Arabia. And so it was bought by this Greek billionaire, and he fancied ships, and these old ocean liners were like his toys. And he had them working in Saudi Arabia and Rabigh and Jeddah and various places that most Westerners never go to. And when he was done with that, he laid them up in a bay in Greece near Piraeus. And for years and years and years, I tried to get on the 3 ships that he had, including this one, the former Oriole. And I was told no. I mean, I was told, don't come to Greece. I got a phone call,
Wow.
Secretary calling, because they were very private about it. But in the late 1900s, they put all the ships up for sale. And at that point, there was a shipbroker who needed photos of the ship. So I made a deal with the shipbroker. I contacted him and said, "Hey, look, get me on the ships, and I'll give you all my pictures, and you can use them to help sell the ships." So he was right on with me, but unfortunately, he ended up selling the ships for scrap. So when that happened, I panicked because this one particular ship was loaded with gorgeous wood and etched glass. And if you've ever been on the Queen Mary in Long Beach, she's like a miniature version of that, burled maple and gorgeous etched glass and all this bent woodwork and just craftsmanship from an era that is long since forgotten. And I had to buy things from her. So I filled a 20-foot container, ended up getting her bar. That was an accident. The guy mistook this mantelpiece that I wanted from the first class bar and put the entire tourist class bar in this container. And I didn't have the heart to say, okay, scrap it, Anyway, so we got it home, and it's made of mahogany. And the day this container arrived, I had doors, I had chairs that had been rescued from the fire pile. They were taking them to be burned for firewood. These beautiful sycamore chairs with leather upholstery. So anyway, I got this stuff, and I was like, I didn't know what to do with it, but we opened the container, filled my garage with it. I cleaned this stuff up. It looked gorgeous. It looked like hell when I got it, but it looked gorgeous after I cleaned it up. And my friends were like, hey, this is really cool. I can't say it, merde. I'll say it in French. This is really cool, merde. Where did you, can you get more of these? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. So after that, I started getting like multiples, like 50 chairs, and my music business career was coming to a close. There was downloading, the record companies were shutting down, and I was like, well, I need to do something with my life that's new and fresh. So I started a business selling these mid-century items to architects and interior designers and the few ship collectors who didn't have a spouse that said, you ain't putting that stuff in our house. So that was kind of how I started my Midship Century website, which is my business of selling these fittings. And I'm still doing that. I have a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't gotten up on the website because it needs updating. That came in last year that I have to get photographed and listed so I can start making some money again. But anyway, so I've been doing this for like 20 years. And every time I knew of a really beautiful ship that I absolutely loved was going to India, I would go through that process, get the airplane ticket, contact my friend there, Kaushal, who takes good care of me and sneaks me into the scrap yards because you can't get there. The government requires you to ask permission. And really, it's a ruse so that they know that you're coming and they're looking out for you. They never grant the permission. And I learned this after a couple times. So I'm literally snuck in. Kaushal tells the shipbreakers that I'm a customer. And of course, the shipbreaker is going to sell stuff to me for 3 times the price he's going to sell it in the local marketplace. So it's a good deal for all. And when the police aren't on the beach, or when I get clearance, I'm told I can photograph and videotape. And so I have this footage of these magnificent ships being destroyed, sadly, but in this epic setting, like out of Close Encounters, that scene in the desert where there were ships in the Gobi Desert. This is what Alang looks like, but 10 miles of it, with tankers and car ferries and container ships and everything just strewn on this massive beach that's out of some, horror film. So that's another aspect of what I do with these ships. And that's the danger of getting obsessed. I'm a very obsessive person. I don't do drugs, but I do ships and I do sparks. That's my other obsession, which
it's becoming mine too. We'll get to sparks for sure.
Okay.
So you still do the Midship Century? You still sell pieces to?
I do, but the site needs some serious updating. A lot of things on the site are sold, and I have to get somebody who's savvy with websites to help me update it. And also, I've got to add a bunch of new stuff, and then I need to bring that back to life. I've had a few, derailments lately. My mom was sick for a while, and I was taking care of her, and she was my main focus. And I adored her, and she passed earlier this year. And one of the things she was telling me, even when she was sick, is, honey, I can't wait till you can get back to your work and you don't have to worry about me. And I'm like, yeah, but I stick around, don't go.
Yeah, I'd rather worry about her than
Of course, of
anything
course.
else.
Oh, she was a gift. She was a legend and a great beauty and a lovely, the best mother I could have ever asked for. And I miss her dearly. But she was 96 and she had a great life, and she was done. She wanted to go and see all of her friends. So
Of course, she's
yeah.
on my list of questions.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but I would imagine, and then I'll get off this topic. I would imagine. So now, for what I'm reading and seeing, are the ships that are being scrapped are less interesting because they're
Yeah.
80s and 90s.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So is there less? Do you have? Is there less reason for you to run to sneak on to the beach because
Yeah.
Carnival ship from the 90s is being scrapped and
Well, if the bloody Carnival ships would ever get to Alang, I did buy a bunch of stuff from their first three new builds, the Tropical Holiday and Celebration, 3 or 4 actually, and the Jubilee. First 4 new builds over the years, because even though I didn't like those ships when they came out, they were original. And their interiors were designed by this entertainment architecture guy, Joe Farkas. They were outrageous, but they were one-of-a-kind ships, and they had artwork that was actually quite good and very expensive. I bought a bunch of ceramic art by this artist named Helen Weber, who was quite well known. And this one ship, the Holiday, was filled with her ceramics. So I bought those. I need to get those up on my website. And I bought this gorgeous stained glass ceiling that Joe Farkas himself designed of the Normandy and the Queen Mary, the two greatest three-funneled ocean liners. They were rivals in the 1930s. And it's a 16-foot wide stained glass ceiling. And if I didn't buy it, it would have been destroyed. So that's sitting in my garage with all these gigantic ceramics that weigh a bloody ton. And I got to get them seen by interior designers. So yes, I did buy some stuff from an era that I never thought I would venture into, which was the 80s. And if the Carnival ships from the 90s were ever to get to Alang, I would buy probably certain things from them as well, because they're original and they're not necessarily my favorite or my taste, but I respect what they are, because everything now is generic. It's imitating Art Deco. It's imitating mid-century. It's imitating Victorian. And original stuff is rare and very important and should be preserved. So that's where I am. So yeah, the reason I didn't buy from all those fantasy class ships from the 90s of Carnivals was because they went to Turkey. And Turkey is just filled with horrible crooks that run the scrapyards. They'll take your money and you'll never see the items you get. And I have somebody in India that can take care of me and make sure I don't have that problem with the Indian breakers. So I don't buy anything from Turkey. But if it goes to India, of course, I'm going to try to get what I can if it's historically significant or unique and interesting.
And last question on this topic. I know Carnival and Princess, they have reached out to you recently for some of those fittings for some of the newer ships.
Well, yes, Carnival did for the Carnival Celebration, which is their current newest, largest ship. It came out last year, which was Carnival's 50th anniversary. So on this one-off ship, they came to me and said, "What do you got?" Because I tried to sell things to them before, and they pretty much laughed at me and said, "Get out of here." So anyway, I sold them a bunch of stuff, and they put it in this Golden Jubilee lounge, and it's spectacular. So of course that was a dream come true for me, and I took the chance of buying more Carnival stuff, hoping that they would do it with their next ship, which is under construction, coming out later this year. And they just basically said, "Nope, sorry." So now I've got this 16-foot stained glass ceiling, which really belongs in a public place or on a Carnival ship or some cruise terminal somewhere. And these ceramics, and I can't blame them, because I took a chance, and in this instance it didn't it didn't pay off the way I wanted it to. But there's still beautiful things, and I'm sure I'll end up selling them at some point.
Yes. When we're done, I'll make sure that you plug everything so people know how to find you.
Cool. Oh, and on Princess, they didn't buy stuff from me, but they had a Love Boat reunion cruise, and I have things from the Love Boat. And I know the whole history of, the Love Boat itself, the hardware, the ships, and which ships were used, and how to tell the difference and such. So they put me on the reunion cruise with the surviving cast members, and I did some lectures about, how to spot the Love Boat, the real Love Boat from the movie set or the stage set, and that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome. My introduction to ships was the Love Boat. I would beg my parents to let me stay up on Saturday nights to watch the Love Boat and then Fantasy Island.
Yeah,
and I watched it on a black and white TV in my little bedroom in Brooklyn, and that was my first introduction to ships of any kind. Is I thought every ship was the Love Boat, and that's what I wanted to do. That was my introduction, and then Titanic, and then it went all weird from there. But that was my introduction, and I watched the whole thing. The last year of my dying relationship, I actually sat and watched it because it's on Paramount Plus, I think.
Oh, it is. You can watch all the episodes on Paramount Plus.
The whole thing is there. I streamed the whole thing. My ex is like, "Are you watching the Love Boat?" I go from start to finish. Do you want to watch it with me?
Yeah.
Nope. So, and I watched the whole thing, and first of all, the ship is exquisite when you compare it to the, which end is which today's ships.
Yeah.
And it holds up. The series holds up really well.
I think it's better now than it was. I didn't like it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When the Love Boat came out, I had always envisioned, and I used to say to my teachers in school and stuff, someday they're going to do a TV show about ocean liners. And I envisioned like a real, like drama, with old movie stars, and it's on board an ocean liner, each crossing a different cast. And then when the Love Boat came out, I'm like, oh my God, somebody stole my idea, right? And then I'm like, oh my God, but this is garbage. It was people like, I don't know what.
Yeah.
The game show hosts and things. And then they mixed in the old Hollywood people. And I loved seeing all the classic Hollywood people. But it was the scripts were so disposable, I thought, and so, lightweight. And now I love it because it was really good-hearted. And I love seeing Charo, and Gene Kelly, it's just like, you never know who's going to show up in an episode. And it was just so wonderful and nostalgic. And it brings me back to the 70s, which I thought, I lived the 70s, and they were a fun decade. Things were looking hopeful in the 70s. I felt more so, and then things got a little dark, I thought, after that. So I love it now, but
yeah, well, if you have Paramount Plus, it's on there. I just think it holds up really well. It's just not like shows today. Like you said, it's very sweet. It's simple. Like the episodes are very repetitive.
Yeah, formulaic. Yeah,
but you like it. It's comforting. It was very much like comfort food for me.
Absolutely.
So now we've covered ships, and if I had the money, I'd fill my apartment with stuff, and my landlord would look at me like, "What are you doing in my house?" But I almost bought a bathroom vanity years ago, but I don't remember why I didn't. Probably didn't have the money. But so now there's a music career.
Yep.
And you are my Sparks guru.
Yes.
And so this is the part that I don't really know much about, is the music career part of Peter. So can you go into that?
Okay. Well, I'll go into more details about Sparks later, but I was obsessed with this band. The thing with Sparks is you don't know who they are, or they're your favorite band, or you hate them. There are people that really hate Sparks. They're just too much personality for some people. So I was obsessed with this band, and during the summer, I was working for a friend who was in the music business, a record promoter, and I loved 80s new wave. And he was doing everybody, Men Without Hats, Men at Work, all the, a lot of underground bands, Flock of Seagulls, you name it. And he was, bragging to me about how well he was doing with promoting these records. And I was just like, wow, could I work for you? And so, okay, so he hired me to work with him one summer. I think it was in 1984. And it was just about calling DJs. He gave me a list of DJs to call at various times and talking to them about the records. Well, in the meantime, I had told Sparks' manager, who I knew, Sparks used to come to the movie theater that I worked at as well. That's how I put myself through college, was working in a movie theater. And I used to let them into movies and got to be friends with them. And I was seeing their songs going nowhere. And I'm like, you guys, you have to get a record promoter. Otherwise, you're never going to get on the charts. So they hired this guy who hired me, and I got to promote Sparks. And the first records I worked were Wham, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, Sparks, With All My Might, the Vels, the Comatines, and a bunch of other underground bands that nobody's ever heard of anymore. And he decided, my boss and friend, he had a little party habit, and he decided to go off to Laguna for like 2 or 3 weeks at a time and not do his work. Meanwhile, I had gotten Sparks to hire him. So I'm like, you can't do this. So anyway, he faded out, and we remained friends for a while. And, he got over, I think he worked on his drug issues and stuff. But when Sparks had this record called Music That You Can Dance To, which is, the next thing that they were working on, they hired me to promote it. I'm like, hey, I'm here. And I decided at that point in my life, I went to UCLA. I was in theater arts. I wanted to be an actor or a director. Well, I was so stage shy that I couldn't do auditions. They just made a nervous wreck out of me. Now I could do it. I've gotten over that, but my stage fright was so horrible. I was so nervous. And so anyway, and then the directing thing, sure. But if you go get an internship somewhere and you got to kiss ass, and who knows how long that's going to take. But I had this immediate opportunity to work with these guys. So I started my own company promoting music. And Music That You Can Dance To came out, and I got it in the top 10 on the Billboard Club Play chart, first time ever for Sparks. And they got a record deal with Curb Records because of it, and we became close friends. And I ended up going on to work all the other bands that were influenced by Sparks: Erasure, Depeche Mode, Duran Duran, all the new wave bands that I absolutely loved. Were influenced by this one album Sparks did with Giorgio Moroder, this electronic producer, in 1979 that opened the door for electronic music of the 80s, basically. So I was promoting these bands that were doing much better than Sparks because I couldn't get DJs to play Sparks all the time. Like I always liken them to green eggs and ham. When somebody finally tries them, they love them, right? But just getting them to try Sparks was just so difficult. So I would try to introduce them to all these different bands. I had a dinner with them with Susie and the Banshees once. Susie grew up, a huge Sparks fan, introduced them to Erasure. Nothing came of that. But later on, Erasure did work with them on a project. There were actually, it was their manager and me that dragged them to meet Erasure. But they were friends with, a lot of other bands too, like Depeche and stuff. So anyway, my idea was always to get one of these more well-known artists to work with Sparks and do a collaboration, because Sparks are masters and they could work with basically anybody. And sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. I did introduce them to a French band called Larita Mitsuko, who were huge in France, and Sparks did work with them, and they're still friends to this day, and do collaborations every now and then. So that was, something I was really proud of. And I just love these guys. They have gone on to do just basically every form of music you can imagine. They're in their 70s now. They Yes, Russell just turned 75 and Ronnie just turned 78. And they are
Wow.
so good on stage. They kick ass. Russell's voice is great. He jumps 5 feet in the air. Ronnie does his shtick and is so funny. And their band is great. And they are just, to me, the ultimate band. They've got everything. They've got a killer image. They are, nobody looks, or a lot of people look and act like Sparks because they copy them, but nobody looked like them when they came out. They worked with Todd Rundgren, Giorgio Moroder, Tony Visconti, who produced David Bowie, and then they produce all their own stuff. And they've just done the last 3 albums they might as well be by 20-year-olds because they are so cutting edge and so cool. And the lyrics that Ronnie writes are on par with Gershwin, with Cole Porter, with Gilbert and Sullivan, with the Beatles. He is a freaking genius like there never was, and so unsung and so modest and such a lovely guy. And yeah, I just can't, I love them. So I'm always promoting Sparks to this day, even after, I've been out of the music business for 20 years. I try to get people to see the movie, The Sparks Brothers.
I am one of them. I just watched it last night.
And you watched it, and I'm so happy you did. But I mean, I have, some of my best friends, my relatives, I'm in the damn movie, and they didn't even bother to see it. And I'm like, don't, and that's not why I want people to see it. I just want people to understand why I've been so obsessed. It didn't just happen. I didn't just go, oh, I'm going to pick this band and go crazy for them. They are brilliant on so many levels. And, I always tell them to this day, because thankfully we're still friends, that, long after they're gone, in 400 years, people will look back at this era of music and they'll know the Beatles and they'll know Sparks and they'll know a few other bands, but almost everybody else will have faded. But Sparks's music is timeless. It is classic. It is brilliant on like I said, on a level like no other band, and they do it all. And I'm so proud of them. They're on their way to Australia now to perform at Sydney Opera House. And so
there you pushed me to get into it. And I've been, the Shelter Cats podcast took a lot of my time.
Of course.
But I finally I listened to it. I'm going backwards instead of forwards.
Mm-hmm.
But everything I listened to, I hear how they influenced everything from Queen to like modern stuff.
Absolutely.
And now I'm like introducing the songs to my friends, and they're like, this is really good.
Yeah.
I like this. This is interesting. This isn't bad. I go, they were actually there first.
Yeah.
And just very, very, very TLDR. They're 2 brothers, and they just, Ron, the keyboardist, he just kind of sits there. He's got a little mustache. He doesn't move.
Yep.
And Russell, again, yeah, he's in his mid-70s. He kind of hops around. You think he's half his age.
Yeah.
And it's just very like they've sailed from like Queen-like to, they were the first, 80s type electronic to 90s to, they kind of started all the kind of genres of music that have come since them.
Yeah.
Since that, and the whole time, I actually ran a quick errand, and I listened to Dick Around.
Yep.
on repeat, I had to go to Target, and going back, I'm walking around Target with my AirPods in my ear, blasting Dick Around. And I'm going, nobody in this store will have ever heard this song, but I bet you they'd be like, what in the world? That's not bad.
They'd instantly think it was Queen. If Queen were half that good. I mean, Queen, I was a Queen fan, and that's how I got introduced to Sparks, because my best friend in high school was like, oh God, you got to hear Sparks. I'm like, what? I was into, Somebody to Love and Tie Your Mother Down and Bohemian Rhapsody. Right. That was that was when Queen was like an epic band. And I hate latter-day Queen. I cannot stand it. I can't listen to them. They drive me crazy. And even Bohemian Rhapsody, I can't even listen to anymore, because to me, they're like a one-dimensional version of Sparks. That was a sound that Sparks started with the multi-layered vocals, like you can hear on, Kimono My House, This Town Ain't Big Enough, and Amateur Hour, and these incredible songs. And it's all Russell doing his vocal overlays, like Freddie Mercury did with Queen. And Freddie Mercury had a beautiful voice, and Queen did have some great songs. I'm just sick of them. And, and I'm glad they had their success. And it always frustrated me to no end that Sparks, who started a year before Queen, and Queen actually opened for them in the UK when Sparks first went over to the UK. And then Sparks had This Town on the charts. It went up to number 2 in 1974 early. And Queen followed the very best songs. And then Bohemian Rhapsody. And then they became
Right.
faded out. I guess the world could only handle one band that sounded like that. But Dick Around was recorded, I think in 2013 or no, 2006. And that song sounds like, it is like Queen amplified, on fire, but pertinent and so cool. And the guitar is by Dean Menta, who was in the band Faith No More. He became part of Sparks's band for a while. So that dude knows how to rock out. And Ron and Russell, that video is so cool. And it's got cats. So,
I did listen to the song first and then the cat, so I'm not that much of a cat. It wasn't the cat the cat that brought me to the song. It was the documentary. They were talking about how difficult. I think Russell talked about how difficult it was to sing that live.
Yeah. Oh, and live. Oh my God. And it's their Crunch live song. They didn't do it on this latest tour, but they've done it on every tour, of the past few years. And now that you're getting into them, I'm sure they'll be back in New York. They're already working on their 27th album. In addition to a major movie soundtrack or movie that they actually wrote the script, and it's a musical that's going to be produced over the next year or two. They are the most creative, indefatigable people. They just never stop. Their energy is mind-boggling, but their whole lives are Sparks. It's every day they go to work. Every day they sit and record and write music, and it's just so impressive. Their work.
What I was struck by was they had a lean period where they had no record deal, I think in the late 80s to mid 90s.
And I was working with them. Yep.
And I don't remember exactly who made this comment. They never had a drug problem. And that's how they were able to get through those times, because they were smart about not spending their money. That little part, that part struck me. They had a few hit albums. They tried something different. It didn't work. And she was explaining this in tears that they were having so many issues getting a record deal, but they weren't also blowing their money stupidly. So that part, that they've not only been so creative to this day, and still are creative, but they've also been kind of smart about it.
Very smart. Very, very smart. They do coffee. That's about the only thing I've ever seen them do. They're very big on their caffeine. And I don't even think, maybe I might have seen them, have some beer at an Indian restaurant, but that might have just been me and their manager who were drinking the beer. I don't remember, because there was beer at the table, but I've never seen them drink alcohol, and definitely they've never touched any drugs. It just hasn't been part of their thing. I mean, they're not prudes, and they're not, they are just intensely creative, and they like to have control. They are control freaks. So, when you delve into drugs and all of that, you lose that control and you lose the ability. I mean, how many fabulous rock stars, had like a 3-year career because they're, they vanished from drugs, So they've always managed, to keep their act together. And even when they were like the music equivalent of Box Office Poison, which is during the period I worked with them, it was really hard to get a deal for Sparks because they were on every record label. And so they'd already been, dropped or moved on, or, So there were fewer and fewer labels every time they would release an album that you could go to sign them. And, the people remember, and, oh yeah, that record didn't sell well. Well, why would we sign you guys? Well, skip the fact that it's just freaking brilliant music. And if you knew how to promote it, it would do well. But record companies, they always want to chase what was big last year,
Right.
They don't get things that they don't understand. And my thing is, if I don't understand, and Sparks do it, like, I haven't loved every single record they've done when it came out. In retrospect, I love everything they've done, because even their worst records still have a spot of brilliance in them, or something that they're pushing to educate their listeners with, a new sound, or just, a strange song structure. Anyway, so I think a lot of that is why people, like, they'll tune into Sparks and they'll be like, oh, that guy sings, he's got such a weird voice. But no, he's got a beautiful voice. My God, he can hit notes that few singers can actually hit. To this day, he can still do it. But they want to hear a guy that sounds like, Simon Le Bon or something. So they don't get that Russell is a unique entity in the music world. And Ron's songwriting is, the lyrics go way above people's heads. It gets too complicated. Even Giorgio Moroder told him, after he produced the Number One in Heaven album, which has some of the most brilliant lyrics ever written, and Russell's voice is hitting these notes that are, they would shatter, glasses, if and Giorgio said, man, maybe just too many lyrics in this one. Maybe next time we make it simple.
And you do a Giorgio Moroder impression.
Of course I do. Well, I worked with Giorgio. I got to meet Giorgio. He's my another one of my idols. I mean, that man, what he was doing with electronic music, with I Feel Love, Donna Summer, one of the greatest records ever recorded. And of course, mixing her gorgeous voice with these pulsating electronic sounds, so far ahead of its time. And then his soundtracks, the Midnight Express soundtrack, and Scarface, he moved from Sparks, of course, to Blondie. And I love Blondie. But Blondie sort of cashed in with Call Me. Giorgio Moroder produced that right after he produced Number One in Heaven, because he learned how to work with a rock band. And so in comes Blondie, and then it get that number one hit. The biggest song of the year was Call Me, and in 1980, and Number One in Heaven probably sold 4 copies in America, and 2 of them I bought because one was a yellow vinyl, So,
but they've always done better overseas.
Yes, for the most part, except in the 80s. If you lived in LA, you would have thought they were superstars, because K-Rock loved them. And the Go-Go's were fans of Sparks, and Jane Wiedlin, who is my favorite Go-Go, joined them for the song Cool Places, which was actually a top. It went to number 40 on the Hot 100, which was the biggest hit Sparks ever had in America. Or it was top 40, in the 40s somewhere when it peaked. So that was Sparks's, major hit. And it was almost looking like Sparks were going to catch on. And then that whole style of music died instantly and sort of left them holding the bag, and they never had a chance to enjoy their full success, So, yeah, but they carried on. They never stopped making music. And that girl in the movie, Christy, who was an artist that they were working with, and she's stunningly beautiful and has a heart of gold, and she's one of my dearest friends to this day, and I adore Christy. She was in the band when they had a resurrection in Germany. They did the song When Do I Get to Sing My Way, from the Gratuitous Sax and Senseless Violins album, came out in 1994, and I promoted that song. And Christy's in the video, and you just can't believe this girl. She's so beautiful, spectacular, and she's got a great sense of humor, and she's a lot of fun. And when Sparks tour, we all go together, a big group of us, and sit near each other and hang out, and it's like family now, and Christy's part of that big family. And she was wonderful in the movie, because it's a very lighthearted, fun movie.
Yes.
And then Christy brings in the sadness and drama of that time, the early 90s, was really rough for them because Tim Burton had signed them to do this movie, My the Psychic Girl, and Christy was going to be My the Psychic Girl. And he just sort of walked away from the project after they had finished recording and working on this thing for years, and it broke their hearts. It was devastating. And they didn't have a record deal. And I was trying to get them record deals in America, and it was always a struggle. Their manager, who was one of my dearest friends, sadly, he passed away from AIDS around that time. And, we were all going to the hospital to visit him, and they were going through a really rough spell. And that's why I got to be in the movie, frankly, because I'm sure that Christy and I were basically the only people that were really working with them on a day-to-day or regular basis anyway. And we're the only people that can talk about that time with any authority, that are still alive, and that really cared and were involved. So there you go. But then they went on, and now they're doing better than ever. After the documentary, they've acquired new fans. They did a collaboration with Franz Ferdinand, a great album. And so a lot of Franz Ferdinand fans came to the Sparks fold, and they discovered just how damn good these guys are still to this day. Unlike some of my other favorite bands like Blondie, I dragged my husband Mike to see Blondie in San Diego a couple of years ago. And as much as I love Blondie, I love their records. But Debbie, she was forgetting lyrics. Her voice, was just ragged. I think they had just come from a European tour or something. And I was just like,
Yeah, I've seen. My YouTube wants me to see Blondie every now and then when they tour, and it's rough. It's definitely rough, and there's so few of the originals left, and except the drummer.
Clem. Oh, he is phenomenal. Clem Burke is still. He's got all the energy in the world. And to be fair, I think the San Diego show we saw with Blondie was just was particularly not their best. And I've seen them really do really well in the 90s when they were touring. I was promoting a song of theirs called Maria, and it was a big hit in the UK, and they were having sort of a comeback, and they had great energy, and I adore Blondie. But again, to me, they're a fraction of what Sparks is, because Sparks never lost it. They've always had it, whether people were buying their records or they were getting airplay on the radio or not. Sparks never lost that inspiration that they've always had. They've always been, a genius.
So you were a record promoter?
Yes, because of Sparks. I had no desire to be a bloody record promoter, but I had the chance to work with these guys, and they were friends, and I cared, and I thought, well, there's no greater cause really, than this. So, and at least as a record promoter, I was in a creative field. I'm a really creative person, and I like being involved with artists and art, whether it's music or movies or what have you. So that meant a lot to me to be able to work with them, and I cherish. It was 20 years we worked together. And, then I finally exited. I didn't want to be the oldest, saddest record promoter in the world. And they were doing music that wasn't dance oriented, at that time. Right. So I couldn't be of service to Sparks. So it was my time to go.
And are you still friends with them to this day?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. I'm so grateful for that. And a lot of that's because of Christy as well. We were out of touch for a while, but I was still going to their concerts and getting their records, of course. And Christy was like, why don't we have lunch with Ronna Russell? So she set it up, and we went up. And ironically, it was the day I was going to see ELO up in LA at the Forum. So I started off, with lunch with Sparks, and then went to see ELO. And it was like my two favorite bands in the world in one day.
What a day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that a business you would ever go back into, record promotion?
That's a good question. I probably would not go back. Well, I don't think there is even the chart anymore, the Billboard Club Play chart, which is what the chart I worked for. I don't think it even exists at this moment in time. I wouldn't go back and deal with DJs. Some of my best friends were and still are DJs, but there were a lot of them that were just really a pain in the what, and they were so egotistical. And going to clubs, Oh my God, I hate going to clubs. I hate going to concerts now, unless it's one of my favorite bands. I just can't tolerate it. I can't stand the noise and trying to have a conversation. And, I don't
Yep.
do all the party favors that everybody likes to do. It's just not fun. It's actually kind of sad. So that part of the business I wouldn't do. But if there was some way to be involved creatively with a band that I loved and they had a use for me, I would certainly consider it. I do look enviously at the people that are now working with Sparks, thinking, gosh, it would be such joy to be able to, be at Sydney Opera House with these guys watching a crowd of, 4,000 or 5,000 Australians screaming because they haven't toured there in 20 years and witnessing this more than just as somebody who goes to see them when they come to LA and perform,
Well,
So, yes.
what bucket list is you and I will go see a Sparks concert.
Okay.
At some point. That is almost near the top of my bucket list.
Okay. Well, you will know about it because they're going to play, if they come back, they'll play New York. They just did. I wish I were, able to, lasso you into the Sparks fanaticism a bit earlier because you could have seen them in New York and they were phenomenal.
But they'll be back. So we will
be back.
We will have an opportunity. And I'm grateful that you persisted.
I wasn't very subtle about it, but Dan,
no.
You're an intelligent guy and you're fun and creative. And I just knew in my heart of hearts that you would love these guys if you got to know them. So, I don't go after people that like, heavy metal or, if I don't think that there's a connection that they would have, I don't bother people. But all my friends who are smart and fun, I'm like, you got to get into Sparks. Especially because you're playing the damn Pet Shop Boys, I mean, Sparks are better,
Yeah, you just hear so many other bands in their music.
Yeah.
And now my thinking is, why the hell were they never bigger in this country?
It's one of the great anomalies. And that's why the documentary is so fascinating, because they worked with all these incredible people and they were famous here and there for a little while. And they've had comebacks and what have you, but never on the scale of Queen or Duran Duran or, the bands that they were influencing, so that's part of what makes the story so interesting. But in a way, they never became a victim of their success either. Because when you make a really big hit record like A Night at the Opera, Elektra Records will come to you and say, well, we want another one of these. So they do A Day at the Races and it's not quite as good.
Yeah.
So although it was great, that's the last Queen album that I liked. But a lot of bands get stuck into the loop of being told by the record labels they have to sound this way or that way. And so they go and they record records that are beneath their potential because that's what the record company told them to do.
Yep. And the 80s were not kind to Queen, that's for sure.
Queen weren't kind to the 80s either, let me tell you. Never hear a crazy little thing called Love or God, what is that one that comes on? It's for Cox Cable, and it's the worst song they ever did. I Want to Break Free.
I hate that song.
Ever. Horrible.
I hate that song with a passion.
Yeah.
There are a couple of 80s Queen I don't mind.
Yeah.
The last
Flash Gordon, maybe because it sounds almost like Queen.
The last two albums are not terrible, but I Want to Break Free is like nails on a blackboard. Sorry.
Oh, horrible.
Sorry, Queen. Sorry, Queen.
Sorry, Queen fans.
Sorry, Queen. Yeah. And my cousin, we're not close anymore. My cousin was obsessed with 80s Queen. And I'm like, the good stuff is back 10 years. Go that way.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, you have to. The new album is so good. It was like 1986. No, it just sounds like it wasn't good. But
no,
I would be remiss to not ask about your mother.
Okay.
Because she had a Hollywood career of her own. Am I right?
Yes. Well, both my parents. My dad was an actor. My dad was a tempestuous man for many good reasons. He was born in Dubrovnik, Yugoslavia on Armistice Day in 1918. His story is unbelievable. I wanted to make a documentary about him, and I started on it, and then COVID came along. He had 8 wives. He did, like I said, 50 movies, 8, maybe 9, because my stepmother, that was after my mom, who was more like a big sister to me, she was only 6 or 7 years older than me, told me that he married some woman in Las Vegas who was the girlfriend of a gangster. And
Wow.
the gangsters came to him and said, "You dump her right now, get it annulled, or you will no longer live." And so that was over. So she says that was true. So there would have been 9 wives. But I think the annulment might, so we'll go with 8, because I know each of these 8 wives very well. And my dad is best known today for being the man whose apartment Ed Wood, the schlocky film director, died in. And I was actually there the night before, witnessing what was soon to be Ed Wood's death. The poor man was so destitute and drunk and penniless, and it was a really horrible thing. And anyway, my dad, not a great dad when I was a kid, but we became really good friends. I love old Hollywood, and he had phenomenal stories. He knew and met everybody, worked with John Wayne, Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Maria Montez, Robert Mitchum was his best buddy. He has really an incredible legacy that is completely forgotten now. And sadly, in Yugoslavia, in Dubrovnik, I've gone back to Dubrovnik several times, and they have no idea who my dad was. He was the first Croatian actor to make it in Hollywood. He was handsome, and he was dashing, and he was trouble. And he was a terrible dad, but a very interesting man. So that's my dad. My mom, on the other hand, drop dead, beautiful woman. She, I would say, of the movie stars that came before her, she most resembled Greta Garbo. She had Garbo's bone structure, eyes, nose, and her mouth, but she had a much fuller mouth, more pretty actually than Garbo. But my mom looked like Garbo. She had the style. She was a model before Grace Kelly became a model, but the clothes that they wore and the way they wore them, and both being blondes and statuesque, I always think of my mom when I see Grace Kelly. So I describe her as a combination of Garbo and Grace Kelly.
Wow.
And Carole Lombard, who was one of my idols, movie stars. My mom was a decent, kind, sweet, very naive girl who met my father at a party. And I think she was extremely attracted to him and didn't know what she was getting into. And she ended up having my brother about literally 9 months after they got married. So I think that's why they got married. And that's it. But yeah, if you see this movie, lovely to look at. She was in a lot of movies as a showgirl. Red Skelton introduces her as the goddess of beauty, and she comes out in this giant hat designed by the designer Adrian, who was the greatest in Hollywood. And he made a comeback for this movie. It's a real schlocky movie, but Zsa Zsa Gabor's in it, and my mom elegantly walks off stage, and Zsa Zsa comes bouncing on looking like she's, stumbling compared to my mom. And so my mom's in lovely to look at, and she's spectacularly beautiful. She's in the big dance production that Vincente Minnelli did. Although the movie was Busby Berkeley, and my mother also worked with Busby Berkeley in another movie with Janet Leigh. So she was in lots and lots of movies as a model or a showgirl. And she was one of the Jimmy Durante girls. And she was a model. And, the face, the most beautiful face. And she had a soul and a spirit to her. When you look at her old picture, she's not just lovely to look at. There's something in there. And as a mother to me, she was so encouraging and so loving and so kind and so devoted. And she struggled raising, 3 kids. My father never paid a penny of alimony, and I think gave her a dime, literally, for child support.
Wow.
That was it. And so she had to support us, and she was getting older in the 70s. We were on welfare, and but my mom always looked gorgeous. And we lived in the Hollywood Hills because my mom's boyfriend bought this beautiful house that we got to live in for a while. So my neighbors were movie stars, and I grew up in a really strange world. I was surrounded with people that knew and worshiped my mom, Anne Bancroft was one of her friends because of my mom's other best friend. Lydia was best friends with Anne Bancroft. So we knew Anne Bancroft and Mel Brooks well and had dinner with them. And, and yet we were poor and living on welfare and food stamps.
Wow.
My mom could only work a few months a year during the season. And she did odd jobs and whatever she could to support us, but it was really rough, supporting 3 sons. My brothers were both, they both had a lot of issues, I think, because my dad messed them up in a big way, and they were both drug addicts at various times. And my mom tried to work through that with them. And,
Wow.
She had a hard, challenging life, but she was always elegant. She introduced me to Loretta Young.
Wow.
When she lived in Palm Desert. Loretta Young was married to, at the time, Jean Louis, the big designer. My mom was Jean Louis's favorite model. And Loretta Young would come to the fittings before she married Jean Louis. She was married to somebody else. And I think they were close friends. And Loretta always dressed in Jean Louis when she did her show. And she twirled out of the door of the Loretta Young show in the 50s. She was always wearing Jean Louis because he was the greatest designer. So she was a fan of my mom's. And so my mom, when she lived in Palm Desert, Loretta Young lived in Palm Springs and had my mom over, and they would watch old movies, usually Loretta Young movies, together. So anyway, she had an Easter dinner, and she invited me, and Loretta sat me next to her on her right-hand side, which was really the place of honor at the table. My mom wasn't even at the table. She was at a secondary table in this place, but Loretta knew I was a movie fan and what an honor it would be. So I had this experience sitting next to Loretta Young, and she grabbed my hand and she looked me in the eye and she said, "Your mother is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen."
Wow.
So I just thought, wow, coming from a movie star renowned for her great beauty, but it was true, so it was, I had so many great experiences because of my mom, and got to meet so many incredible people that either wanted to marry her or were just her friends, and she would never marry after my dad. The one man that she loved was sort of, what would we say today? There's a new word for being bi, right? And a friend of his came to my mom and said, "Would you be, okay with an open relationship?" And my mom said, "No, I can't do it. I just can't, So,
Right.
so he broke up with her after that and broke her heart. But that was just sort of, the situation. She wasn't going to marry anybody that she didn't love. She wasn't going to marry for money. She had moguls and famous authors and, the man who ran Atlantic Records. These are all people who wanted to marry my mom, and she wouldn't do it. She didn't love them in that way. And so she wasn't going to sell herself out, So that was my mom, and she was my dear friend. And she lived with us for the past 5 years. When she turned 90, we moved her into our house here, and she never had to go into a home. And she was always, here. And to the very last day, she was doing an interview on the phone with somebody about her career. This guy just happened to call me when she decided she no longer wanted to eat and she wanted to get out of this world. So I told the guy, I said, she's lucid and she's here. So get your questions together and call me right back, because I don't know how long we're going to have her.
Oh my God.
She did an interview about her career, literally on her deathbed. And she was funny and warm and, humorous. And it was really something, I cherish her and I miss her terribly.
It sounds like an extraordinary, like the mother everyone aspires to have, including every picture you shared. You could tell when you said elegance, you see the even in the more recent pictures, you see that there was always a well put together, elegant human being.
Yes. Yeah. And she didn't like dressing up. She didn't like, in her latter years, she hated dressing up because she wanted to be comfortable. She still had, nice clothes in her closet and stuff, but she was much happier, like wearing, a running suit, and that's what she kind of wore. But boy, she put on her lipstick and her sunglasses and bam,
Yeah, she rocked it. Even if she was just in in comfy clothes, so to speak.
Yep. Yep.
He was definitely struck by that, and she got to live in the ocean liner home.
Yes, she did, and she loved the way it looked, but she's like, these chairs are too damn low. They're so uncomfortable. So I'm like, okay, Mom. So we did a Frasier with her. She had a TV chair. I have two gorgeous chairs from the United States, right? And I had to move one out of the living room and replace it with her TV chair, but we still use the TV chair to this day. And whenever we have a party or something, we just move the TV chair into Mike's office and bring the United States chair back so we can all be uncomfortable but surrounded by
She had her own Frasier's dad chair.
yep,
That is
yep,
awesome. That's
yep,
great.
yep.
Yeah, I when I worked at the Merchant Marine Museum, there was some United States furniture, and I was struck by how tiny it looked and uncomfortable. So I could understand her wanting. I could understand her remark about the chairs being too low.
Yep. She made that very clear to me that she was getting her chair. Mike, of course, was, Mike is very, how do we say, obsessive compulsive. So that chair just ruined the whole setting for him, and he went crazy. But now he sits in it, and he's more comfortable in it too.
So he was more Frasier about the chair, you'd say.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I was like, whatever. We got it. Mom needs this, so let's just do it. I wasn't thrilled the way it looks, but it's definitely more comfortable than my United States chairs.
Well, Peter, I'd say the best outcome from my ocean liner obsession was that we became dear friends.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad. Thank you for being obsessed with those. And I'm glad I can drag you into another obsession, Dan. I'll help you along if you want recommendations on particular Sparks albums. But keep going on YouTube and finding their videos, and especially the ones that spell out their lyrics, because it's hard to understand their lyrics sometimes. But that's the joy, really. That's what makes them so timeless. Is these lyrics are Moliere or Shakespeare. They're on that level. So.
Well, one last anecdote. Again, I don't remember the name. I watched this late at night, and I stayed up to watch it because I would not do this interview without watching that movie because you'd kill me. Mm-hmm. But somebody remarked that a lot of the lyrics represent a feeling of not being good enough.
Oh yeah,
and that's kind of that's the place that the lyrics come from, and I can relate to that. So I think in addition to it's just catchy music. I just when I was showering earlier, I had my smart speaker. I just play Sparks, and I think it was playing from the Balls album when I turned it off.
Oh, cool.
And, because it started with my song of the day, which is Dick Around, and then it went to something else, and then it was playing the Balls album when I paused it. It's just interesting. I just like that they're two dudes who obviously dye their hair, that they're brothers. They don't look like rock stars. They don't necessarily act like rock stars, but they've been ahead of the curve, and they still are, and they're in their 70s. And I find that fascinating when people can be that relevant and influential for that long of a period of time.
Yeah.
Instead of feeding off their past success and making the same album over and over again. As much as I like the new Stones album, it's not exactly breaking new ground. But if you listen to Girl Is Crying in Her Latte with what's her name, Cate Blanchett,
yeah,
dancing like I would if I had an itch.
Yeah.
I when she did that at Glastonbury, I go, I could dance like that because that's about as good as I could do. But it's just so different and fresh and current, and I played it for my friends, and they're like, who the hell are these people? I go, they've been around 50 years. Go look them up. But the one of the best parts of that ocean liner era is that I became friends with you, and that friendship grows now that your YouTube and social media, and we didn't have iPhones 25 years ago. I had to email you.
Yeah.
That you've had such a varied passions and music and ocean liners and you've made something of it. It's not just like me. I had to buy every deck plan and then I sold them. You've made like something of it. You've carved your niche, and I find that fascinating.
Well,
So
thank you.
Thank you so much for being my test for a non-cat podcast.
Okay, I hope it does well for you. And wait. Here, just to mish go. Okay.
And
just in case you need to put it on the cat podcast, you know. So.
you're the spinoff.
Okay.
So how do people find you? How do people find your website and everything? Plug.
Okay. Well, my name is spelled Knego. So just if you know how to spell my last name, you can find all kinds of stuff, things that I haven't even seen about me probably online. But my YouTube channel, which is what is current and my passion project, is Peter Knego's Midship Cinema. And that's the YouTube channel. And there's about 80 videos on there now, and they're new ships and old ships. And it's not just ships. It's, you know, it's a lot of what's behind the ships, you know, the architecture, design concepts, those kind of things. I try to make it a little more interesting, and you will never hear me say the words amazing or iconic. They are forbidden in my vocabulary because that's what everybody else is out there doing. So
thank you.
So that's my YouTube channel. My website is Midship Century. Midship meaning that's the best part of the ship. That's where first class used to be when you're crossing the Atlantic, because it's the most stable. And century, like mid-century. So midshipcentury.com is my website. But again, forgive me because it's not fully up to date, but it's still interesting, and it's got a lot of photos of ships being demolished and what ships used to look like compared to what they look like today. So if you're interested in design and mid-century architecture, it has interest beyond just the nautical maritime stuff. And that's
it's amazing. One of the and I run the Instagram for Midship Cinema, so he's on Instagram. There's a Midship Centuries on Facebook as well, so go like those things.
Please do. Yes. Come subscribe to Midship Cinema. And yes, and Dan, I'm so grateful to you because I really, Instagram, my iPhone is too small. I can't see half the time. I'm typing the wrong letter. And then a spell check comes in, and it's like if you're in a hurry and you're trying to get something posted, it's a disaster. And so I appreciate so much that you're doing these posts for me when I put out new videos. It means a lot.
No problem. I'm happy. I'm happy that we get to work together.
Thank you.
And go on the Midship Cinema YouTube. The videos are fascinating. They're not the usual. As much as I think I like Emma Cruz's, she's one of the standouts, but so many of them, you could just tell that they're basically paid advertisements half the time. You have an almost, dare I say, sparks sense of humor to your videos.
Yes, thank you. I'm flattered and honored. Yes,
and that grows with each video, because when I watch them, I'm usually texting you, I like this line. I like this line. I want to see more of you in this. I'm usually like, critique as it's live. So there. Please go follow his channel. Go follow the Instagram. It's great stuff from ships that not necessarily are around anymore and are a lot more interesting. And Peter, I'm so glad that we're good friends. Thank you so much for doing this, and we will be at a Sparks show soon.
I hope so, Dan. May it be very soon. I'm going to tell Russell to hurry up and finish that new album so they can tour. And again, thank you, and thank you for letting me, be the first on your spinoff here. And I hope it does really well for you. I appreciate your work and your passion and your humor as well. You are very funny and very amusing, and I'm glad you're finding an audience here. That's so cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that you find my rants funny. Thank you so much. because we're so people know we're also Facebook friends, and occasionally I may rant about a movie I'm watching or
Oh no,
my ex-girlfriend or something about my landlord or work.
no irony ever. No, exactly. Yeah, you're very mellow about it. You really have to read between the lines.
Sometimes I rant, and some of my friends will message me privately. Maybe I should go get help.
Well,
and you're more like, go listen to Sparks.
Yeah, go listen to Sparks, because that's my help. I tell you, that's
whatever the problem. He'll like it.
Yeah.
You know,
There's
Sparks.
a Sparks song for every situation.
You know, I'm sorry you're going through that. Go listen to Sparks. That's usually what you comment, and you know what? You're right. So thank you very much. And I will speak to you soon. Thanks so much.
Okay, my friend. Take care. Thanks for everything.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello there, Dan the Cat Man here, even though this is not a cat podcast. I mean, we could talk, Peter and I could talk for hours. Just interesting, fascinating. So many more questions I could have asked him. We'll have him on again. This will be part of my new series that I'm working on with my friend Sherry, who was on my Jasper episode. The Hermit Chronicles, will be hosting it together. So this is just a kind of a test run, and I think this was a resounding success because it's just fascinating to talk to him about just everything from the music career to this band Sparks. Please go listen to Sparks. Sparks are amazing. They're just awesome. They're just great music. Can't pigeonhole a band like Sparks, and I'm so grateful that he turned me on to them. And although my fanatic passion for ocean liners has long left me, it's still interesting and fascinating what his whole connection with ships and how he's been able to rescue fittings, pieces of art, furniture, wood panels, everything. Just really cool. Because, you know, to be interested in it and to own a brochure is one thing. To actually have these pieces in your home so that you could live and enjoy and be surrounded by is really cool. It's a cool way to preserve the past. So I'm grateful to him that he joined me for this episode. I'm grateful to all of you for joining me on this non-cat detour, and we're going to see where it goes. And thank you so much. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week for a cat-related episode. See you then. Thank you.